He woke to silence. Not an alarm clock, not the noise of the city, a silence that hit his temples like the emptiness after an explosion. On the 47th floor above the Hudson, servers usually hummed, coffee machines whispered, and the walls breathed with conditioned confidence. Today, only the flicker of a television. On the screen, his face, frozen in a frame with the caption, "Cloud technology tycoon Ethan Rowe is at the center of a massive scam." In the corner, a red live bar blinked, and an announcer erased his name from the marble he had spent 2 decades building. Ethan, the son of a school bus driver from Ohio, who climbed the steps of Silicon Valley like a climber without insurance, was used to headlines. But these were different ones, about a record-breaking IPO, about a white jacket at the Met Gala, about a foundation that finances education for children from depressed towns. He pressed mute, but the words gnawed at his heart: hidden accounts, tax maneuvers, fake users. His company was being reduced to an algorithm of lies. The phone rang. "Don't go to the press," Leon, a co-founder and friend from their dorm days, wrote. "This is a controlled storm. The lawyers will sort it out." Leon's brevity had always seemed like an anchor to Ethan. But today there was something alien, cold about his brevity, as if it were written by a hand that didn't smell like coffee and late-night brainstorming sessions, but like fresh paint on bulletproof glass. "This is a mistake," he whispered into the void. "This couldn't have happened." He felt his pulse pound in his throat, and the buttons on his shirt were clenched like a cage. He called the press secretary, but instead of a voice, he heard a recording. "Your call is important. We'll call you back." He called his lawyer. The voice was too flat. His own calendar was flashing with cancellations. The meeting with the senator, postponed. The meeting with the school foundation, sorry, we can't make it. The dinner auction, in the midst of a scandal. When he finally stepped onto the terrace, the city lay out like a map of his life's journey. Deals here, betrayals there. The first office above the pizzeria, where pizza boxes were served in pairs. The wind was cold and clear as a verdict. He dialed Leon. "Tell me," he said hoarsely, "that we're clean. We did everything within the market." The latter replied cautiously. "Traffic protocol is standard." "Ethan, don't be dramatic." "I have the word scam in the headlines," Ethan said. "This is not standard." "I'll meet you at the office in 2 hours," Leon decided. Ethan hit reset, left his phone on the railing, and for the first time in years allowed himself weakness. He closed his eyes. In the darkness, as if in water, he heard another voice, a voice long forgotten. "You didn't get rich because of luck," his father said, starting the bus engine at dawn. "You got rich because you stood next to the truth every minute, even when it stank of oil and sweat." The screen on the wall flashed again. SEC opens investigation. The word investigation struck like metal on bone. The taste of rust appeared in his throat. He opened his laptop, connected to the internal logs, and saw numbers that didn't match his memory. Someone had been going through his house, rearranging the furniture at night. "Leon," he whispered, not knowing whether it was a prayer or an accusation. And then a memory popped up from the bottom left corner of the screen, like an unexpected pop-up. The evening Leon had said, "Trust me, we're going to accelerate growth a little." Ethan had signed on then. Today, he felt like he had signed on to something bigger. The thunder hadn't struck, but the cloud inside had already burst, and the rain was pouring down on his chest. The office greeted him with the smell of metal and anxiety. The glass gleamed cleaner than conscience, and it only emphasized the dirt that oozed from the news. The team looked at him like a pilot who had stepped out of the cockpit during turbulence. "Are we with you?" was red in the eyes, but their hands nervously gripped their cups, as if each was holding their own little lifebuoy. Leon was waiting for him in the Apollo 11 conference room. Symbolic, Ethan thought. We always liked to name rooms after people who had risked their lives for the stars. On the table were printed charts. On the screen was a presentation called Interim Strategy. "Sit down," Leon said, without getting up. "We're preparing a statement. It's technical. The market will calm down." "Is that true?" Ethan pointed to the headline. "Truth is a flexible concept," he answered too quickly. "We have methodologies that competitors also use." "Do we buy bots?" Leon was silent for exactly 3 breaths. "We optimized engagement through partners," he said cautiously. "Partners with human faces?" Ethan blurted out. "Partners with results." Leon snapped. You wanted space. I built a fuel tank. You built an explosive under my name. Ethan replied quietly. Marissa, a lawyer, entered the room with a pale iPad. The SEC has requested internal correspondence and access logs for the last 18 months. And also, she glanced at Leon. There is an anonymous tip-off with details of the schemes. They know about the gardens. Gardens, that's what Leon called the warm pools of traffic, where the numbers were washed like shirts in an expensive laundry. Ethan had never liked that word. Today it smelled of bleach and blood at the same time. By the end of the day, a wall of cameras had grown under the office. One of the former partners had written a 20-tweet thread on Twitter about the culture of fear. Investors didn't call to support us, to check if we were sinking slowly enough to sell our life jackets. Magazines with covers that had his face on them yesterday had shoved him inside today, behind watch ads. That evening, his mother called. Son, I don't understand those words on TV, she said. But I know you. You know who I wanted to be, he replied. Not who I became. A person is not a headline, she said. A person is a choice. After the conversation, he went back to the server logs and saw the traces. Someone logged in at night. Someone made post-mortem adjustments. Someone carried metrics from week to week. Someone had super admin access. Someone had been sitting to his right for 10 years. Another thought hung in the air like a cobweb, about the foundation, about scholarships, about the kids who would wake up tomorrow to the news that their benefactor was a fake. The morning came with a blow that knocked the air out of his lungs. The board of directors had removed him from the CEO position pending an investigation. The message was coolly corporate and signed. At the bottom was a quote from Leon about process integrity and commitment to the team. Ethan read it 3 times, feeling the old photos on the walls, them young, laughing among the boxes, begin to smell like ashes. So you chose, Leon, he said to himself. You chose to survive without me. He looked out the window. The city pulsed like a galaxy where every star was foreign. And for the first time in years of success, it seemed to him that he was an astronaut who had been landed on another planet without a helmet. He went where he wasn't being watched through the glass, the bottom floor of an old data center in Brooklyn, where half the shelves had once been rented. Nick was still working there, a gray-haired administrator with hands like old cables, stiff but reliable. Nick always said little and drank black coffee like an oath. I heard, Nick said when Ethan entered. The world loves to build altars and light them with the same match. I need the truth, Ethan replied. And access to archives that are no longer technically mine. Archives are like memories of first love, Nick sighed. They never completely disappear. Sit down. They descended into the digital dungeons. Old backups, encrypted with keys that only Nick remembered, opened before them like the quiet rooms of a childhood home. In the logs, there were night sessions that appeared a minute after emails from several partners. In the chats, there were instructions not to ask too much. In the contracts, there were additions in the 6th small font. And most importantly, there was a file called absurdly simply, Sunset. XLSX. In this file, there were gardens, traffic farms, laid out by time zone, with contacts of nominal directors and friends of the house. Above some of the lines, there were Leon's comments. This is temporary. This is a bridge over the abyss. We'll have time to rewrite the game. He did it, Ethan whispered, and the words hit his chest like ice water. He's not the only one. Nick shook his head. The market is a language of hints. But few people leave such clean handwriting. If I go to the SEC with this, I'm not just burning Leon. I'm burning the company. The people. The scholarships. Nick looked at him carefully, the way one looks at a man standing over an abyss, searching for the weight of his wings. And if you don't leave, he said, you'll burn yourself. And then everything else will burn too, just more slowly. Before leaving, Nick handed him a small flash drive wrapped in blue electrical tape. This is your memory, he said. Take it while you still remember who you are. Ethan walked through the Brooklyn night, each streetlight illuminating his doubt like a stage. He dialed a number he hadn't dialed in years. Lauren, he said into the phone when there was a pause. I need a journalist who isn't afraid to lose access for the sake of the truth. Are you still like that? Lauren, the ex, not the lover. No, his ex-conscience in the form of a person with a sharp pen. They parted ways when he decided that Empire needed silence, not awkward questions. I've become more careful, she said. But it doesn't seem to work with you. What happened? I have a night's son, he said, and he clutched the flash drive in his pocket. It could burn half a continent. They met in a small cafe by the bridge. Lauren listened without interrupting, only occasionally asking questions, like a surgeon touching a wound not for pain but for diagnosis. When he finished, she placed her palm on the table. If this is published tomorrow, she said, you lose everything. If you don't publish it, you lose yourself. Choose, Ethan. But know this, the truth is also a currency. It is exchanged for the future. And if the future can't be bought, then at least you won't sell it a second time, she replied. At night, alone, he inserted the flash drive into his old laptop and pressed copy. A progress bar slowly crept across the monitor, like a shadow from the sun on a wall. When it reached the end, his chest became quiet. The silence returned again, but different. Not empty, but with a hint of resolution. The choice did not want to wait. The board of directors called an extraordinary briefing. Outside the office, a crowd and posters. Bring back our pensions. In the feeds, caravels of anger, landing parties in the comments. Lawyers advised to cooperate. Investors hinted at a soft exit. Leon suggested privately, sign this, admit the communication error, and we will move on. Next, where? Ethan asked, and for the first time in days looked him in the eye not as a co-founder, but as a man holding a match over gasoline. To Mars? To the bottom? To the next quarter, Leon answered, and in these words was the entire market. Eternity, broken down into 3 months. Ethan went up to the stage of the audience, where he had once presented new products that seemed to change the world. The cameras clicked like handcuffs. He felt the microphone give off a slight jolt to his palm, whether it was nerves or electricity. I am Ethan Rowe, he began, and the room fell silent. And today I speak not as a CEO, but as a man who has lost the right to speak for others until he tells the truth about himself. Graphs appeared on the screen behind him. He showed gardens, night entrances, comments. He called out names, his own, too. He said, I didn't push these buttons, but I pushed the others, the ones that were closing my eyes. In the front row, Leon clenched his fists. You're going to ruin everything, he hissed through his teeth, rising. You're betraying the team. I was betraying it when I was silent, Ethan answered into the microphone. I'm just quitting today. We have lawyers, Leon snapped. We have kids from Ohio, Ethan said. They look at us and decide who they become. We have no right to sell them a mirage. The hall erupted. Some shouted bravo. Others, go to jail. The journalists rose like birds on takeoff. Ethan felt his shoulder blades straighten, not wings, no, just his spine straightening. He handed the flash drive to the SEC representative who sat to the side, like a shadow of the state. After the briefing, the hallway was as narrow as a bottleneck. Leon caught up with him at the elevator. You don't understand, he said dully. We would straighten everything out. The market forgets. People remember, Ethan replied, especially those we taught to dream. You will be destroyed, Leon snapped. And not me, the world. It breaks those who rise above the instructions. Maybe, Ethan said, but at least I know why. The elevator opened. Inside, the mirror reflected a face, the brilliance that the cameras loved so much gone, and another appeared, rougher, more truthful. Lauren ran up to him on the street. You just made a man out of yourself, she said without a smile. Are you ready to pay the price? And was it ever low? He asked, and for the first time in a long time, his voice sounded like a soft laugh, reminiscent of the old music room in the courtyard where he and Leon had once dreamed of an honest empire. That evening, a letter arrived. Contract terminated. Options canceled. Personal assets under arrest until the case is resolved. Signed, the council. No names. The world was doing what Leon had promised. It was breaking. But inside it was strangely even, like a ship that had finally emerged from a hurricane and realized it still had a mast. The case dragged on for months. The world learned to pronounce his last name with the tone of scandal and then with the tone of history. The SEC announced that the company was guilty of manipulation. The fines were like bridges over a river of shame. Leon made a deal with the investigation and received less than he should have, but more than he had hoped for. Ethan, community service, a ban on holding executive positions for 3 years, the return of part of the capital to the fund of injured investors. His name no longer shone on the facades, and this was strangely relieving. He returned to Ohio, not as an exile, as a son. He took his elderly mother to the doctor, took his nephew to school team games, gave lectures in the library on how not to replace a dream with its shadow. At night, he worked on a new project, not a platform for everyone, but a workshop for a few, an open school for digital ethics, where students learned to write code that didn't lie, even when it was convenient. One day, a letter arrived on yellowed paper. Handwritten. "I'm one of those who lost their retirement savings to your company." A woman from Minnesota wrote. "I watched your confession live. I cried. I'm angry, and I'll be angry for a long time. But I've come to the conclusion that I want my grandchildren to live in a world where the rich can be honest, because someone once showed me how painful it is and how it's possible. I don't forgive. I believe." He held the letter in his hands for a long time, like broken bread. Then he went to the school where he taught. The classroom smelled of markers and dreams. "Today," he told the students, "we're going to talk about variables that don't fit into the code, conscience and price. You'll have a chance to be successful, I have no doubt. But one day you'll be offered a bridge over the chasm. I won't say don't take it. I'll say ask yourself, where does it lead?" After class, a guy in a tattered jacket came up to him. "Mr. Rowe," he said, "is being honest worth it?" Ethan smiled the way those who have already given smile. "It's worth it," he said. "But sometimes that's all it takes to buy what's really important, the right to look in the mirror." That evening, standing in the stadium, where the soft light of the floodlights made every face a little better, he called Lauren. "You know," he said, "I keep thinking about one question. Can you be rich and honest?" "And you already know the answer," she said. "You can be honest and not become poor in yourself. Everything else is a variable." He put down the phone and looked at the sky. The stars, which are not visible in the city, shone here evenly, like code points that form a constellation. It seemed to him that somewhere out there, on the other side of the market buzz, someone was writing on an invisible board. Truth is also a strategy. And as he returned home along the dark street, he felt a letter from an unknown woman warming his fingers in his pocket. He did not know whether he would return to the big game, whether he would be allowed to build ships to fly to the stars again. But he knew something else. If he returned, without gardens and bridges over the abyss, only with bridges leading to the bright shore. And if not, he had already built one bridge within himself. What is more important, truth or success? The world once asked. Today the answer didn't sound like a teaching formula. It sounded like a heartbeat. Success bought without truth is not yours. And truth, even if it strips you to the bone, is the only thing that can grow new flesh. Ethan Rowe, the son of a bus driver and former cloud lord, walked home through the autumn wind. He was poorer in headlines, but richer in silence. And in that silence, between the steps, an answer was born that didn't fit into reports. The past is not bought with money, but with choice. And that choice, like the stars, is best seen when it's dark.